All right, we have some big news coming in. China has confirmed it has reached an agreement with India to end the standoff between two armies in eastern Ladakh. Huge development coming in as India-China relationship sees a thaw. Nearly 5 years later, we're looking at both nations coming to an agreement on patrolling. Arrangements have already been started. And in the latest confirmation coming in, China has reached an agreement with India to end the standoff between the two armies in eastern Ladakh. Massive development indeed. We're looking at nearly 4.5 years of tensions along the line of actual control. And now in the sidelines of the BRICS summit, we hear that India and China has come to an agreement finally for disengagement. Troops to be pulled back. Of course, the army chief today has also spoken, saying the buffer zones is the worry. Work is to ensure trust build up between the two nations, which was lacking in the last 4.5 years. And now we have yet another confirmation coming in, a first reaction from China on the India-China truce. So we're looking at commitment. This time around, it appears more genuine. China confirming that it has reached an agreement with India to end the standoff between two armies in eastern Ladakh. Now, that said, could this lead to bilaterals between the two nations? Well, we're waiting for a confirmation to come in. We know that Xi Jinping is there as part of the BRICS summit, and so is Prime Minister Modi. Will they have a side talk? Will there be a pull aside? Will there be discussions between the two nations? That remains to be seen. A confirmation hasn't come in as yet, but this is a first statement that comes in from China for sure at this point, confirming that they've reached an agreement with India to end standoff between the two armies in eastern Ladakh. We know that the Indian army and the Chinese army in the last few years have really clashed on multiple levels, with many soldiers losing their lives as well. At this point, India has been stern and China seemed to have committed to disengage. Let me cut across to the Chinese representative confirming on the same. Listen in. Catch that audio there. There seems to be a glitch, but that's the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Lin Jian, who's confirmed, saying that India and China have come to an agreement to disengage troops along eastern Ladakh. Certainly a big development in diplomatic ties between the two nations. Let me cut across to Shivani, our correspondent, joining us for more on that. Shivani, we're looking at the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Lin Jian, who's confirmed that India-China has reached an agreement for troops disengagement along eastern Ladakh region. Give us more. Have you heard what he said? We're going to play that out for our viewers in just a few moments. But Shivani, do decode this.
Nabila, this is a big confirmation that has come from China now, because we were awaiting a response since yesterday when the MEA of India had announced agreement upon the patrolling resumption between India and China along the line of actual control on the remaining friction points. And now the confirmation has come from the Foreign Ministry of China itself. And in a response to the questions about the reported agreement between India and China on the border patrol in dispute areas, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson confirmed progress. And what he said was that China and India have maintained close communication through diplomatic and military channels regarding border-related issues. And what was also confirmed is, Nabila, that the two sides have reached a solution on the relevant matters. So they did not specify, as India did, that we will be resuming patrolling, but they've called it a issue, the solution on the relevant matters, which China views positively. So China has said that this is a positive indication with India when it comes to the line of actual control. And in the next phase, the China will be working with India to effectively implement the solution. The spokesperson Lin Jian has stated. So this is a big confirmation, Nabila, now that's coming in from China after yesterday MEA had announced that the agreement has been reached between India and China to resume the patrolling on the remaining friction points, and what it was being referred to leading to disengagement. So the tensions will ease out from the remaining friction points, especially Demchok and Depsang plains that are the traditional friction points between India and China along the line of actual control.
Ani, we hear even External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has confirmed on this. He says, we can say now disengagement process with China has been complete. We will be able to start patrolling, which we were doing in 2020. So to reach that 2020 status quo is huge development indeed. So are India's External Affairs Minister also confirming on the same lines?
Today, Dr. S. Jaishankar was speaking in an event in New Delhi, and he confirmed that the disengagement process is still on, and the disengagement is happening from the friction points between India and China along the line of control, line of actual control. And he said that the progress has been made through several rounds of talks and discussions between the diplomats of India and China, and also on the military levels. While the diplomats were talking, the WMCC meetings were happening on different channels. These discussions were taking place on ground. The military commanders were also meeting and speaking to each other, trying to get a consensus on what the progress has been now made. So the confirmation has not only come from the Ministry of External Affairs, the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, who had yesterday announced this big development, but after that Dr. S. Jaishankar had also made announcements and a detailed quote that we got from Dr. S. Jaishankar on this development. He said that we are working on this, we have been working on this, and very important out here is to mention that the army chief a short while back from now, Nabila, has also confirmed and has reacted for the first time on this development. He says that we all wanted a consensus on the status quo of April 2020, that is before the Galwan tension happened in June 2020. The initial point, we wanted status quo, and now when this development has been made, Nabila, this is a very positive symbol, and the army is also looking forward to the disengagement, but starting to build the confidence-building measures and the trust on China, because that is also very important. That's what the army chief said, that we want that trust back. We will be watching the LAC very closely, and the patrolling will continue to ease out tensions.
Right. Shivani, stay with us. I'm going to quickly cut across to the Chinese Foreign Minister Lin Jian, who's just spoken. Listen in, confirming the India-China talk.
China have reached a deal on patrolling along the disputed border in the Himalayas. He said it can lead to disengagement and resolution of conflict. Could we confirm with the ministry that such an agreement was achieved, and are there other details? My second question related to this is, does the agreement open the path to a bilateral meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the BRICS summit happening now? Thank you.
关于你提到的第一个问题，
Our first question,
近段时间以来，
over a recent
中印
period of
双方
time,
通过
China
外
and
交
India
和
have
军事
been
渠
in
道
close communication through diplomatic and military channels on issues related to China-India border.
双方已就有
Now, the two sides have reached resolutions on relevant matters, which China speaks highly of.
下一步
Going forward, China will continue to work with India to implement these resolutions.
双边会见
On the bilateral meeting that you mentioned, I answered similar questions yesterday. We will keep you updated if anything comes up.
下一个问题
Next one, please.
From PTI.
Now that
All right, so that's a confirmation that we hear from the Chinese Foreign Minister Lin Jian, who says that India-China have decided to disengage along eastern Ladakh, the line of actual control, which has been a friction point for two nations. Both the nations, since the last 4.5 years, finally sees some consensus. And at this point appears China is committed to disengagement. Patrolling arrangements have already been made. The next process will be disengagement. And this likely will then go back to status that was maintained back in 2020. To bring that back to reality now is certainly huge development in the relations between the two nations. Now, China confirms right ahead of the BRICS summit, as soon as as it begins, Prime Minister Modi has just landed. This comment right now coming in from China also indicates that there could be bilateral talks between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping on the cards in the sidelines of this BRICS summit. Certainly huge development here. Both nations for the last 4.5 years have had massive friction along the line of actual control, with nearly 20 or more Indian soldiers who died in clashes and an unaccounted for number of Chinese soldiers who died along the Galwan region. Now we know that the tensions and the standoff prevailed for nearly 4.5 years, with many meetings that were held, over 30 meetings that were held between India and China, and India insisting on them backing off. But it appeared that all those 30 meetings, each time that China would commit, they would go back on their word. And finally, it appears right ahead of the BRICS summit, as soon as it begins, before that itself, China confirming that both nations have now agreed to disengage along the eastern Ladakh region. Massive development indeed. Prime Minister Modi, who's right there on the ground, he's going to be meeting with the Indian diaspora on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. Gaurav Sawant, who's bringing us those live images. Over to you, Gaurav.
ऑन ग्राउंड देखिए, ये भारत का अब रवैया साफ है. यू डोंट गो बाय व्हाट चाइना सेज, यू गो बाय व्हाट चाइना डज ऑन ग्राउंड. क्योंकि चीन हमेशा मीठी बातें करता है और मीठी बात के बाद वो मान लीजिए आपके इलाके में 4 किलोमीटर आगे बढ़ाएगा, फिर 2 किलोमीटर पीछे चला जाएगा और फिर बोलेगा देखिए हमने तो शांति बहाली कर ली. लेकिन 2 किलोमीटर तो फिर भी वो आगे बढ़ ही जाता है. और इसीलिए इस बार भारत का रवैया बिल्कुल साफ रहा है कि आप अप्रैल मई 2020 से जो पहले की स्थिति थी उसको फिर से लागू कीजिए. और अप्रैल मई 2020 से पहले की जो स्थिति थी उसका यह मायने है कि भारत की जो सेना थी वो अपने डेप्सैंग से लेकर डेमचौक तक सारे पेट्रोलिंग पॉइंट्स तक भारत की सेना जाती थी और भारत वही उसकी बहाली चाहता था. अच्छा, चीन ये कह रहा था कि डेप्सैंग और डेमचौक को आप छोड़ दीजिए, बाकी सभी मुद्दों पर चीन की सेना पीछे हट गई है. और वो अग्रीमेंट पहले हो चुके थे और इस बात की पुष्टि विदेश मंत्री डॉक्टर एस जयशंकर कह भी चुके थे जब उन्होंने कहा था कि 75% समस्या का समाधान हो चुका है. लेकिन नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार का लक्ष्य अलग था. वो 100% उस अब 2020 की सिचुएशन को सॉल्व करना चाहते थे जिसमें डेप्सैंग और डेमचौक शामिल है.